They called him Hob, and no one remembered why. Maybe it was short for Hobart, or maybe it came from the way he walked, like he was forever dragging something behind him, though he was. Tall, built wiry and tight, with a sun-scoured face that never softened, Hob was the kind of man people stopped talking when he entered a room. Not because he was dangerous, but because they were never quite sure he was. He rode alone and worked harder than anyone on the Linehorn spread, a dry swath of cattle country running out of Black Claw Ridge. He spoke little, ate less, and had a way of breaking in colts that looked more like understanding than dominance. Horses trusted him, men tolerated him, nobody called him friend. The crew knew better than to push him, until one day they did. It was Lars Caldwell's idea. Lars, with his moonshine laugh and mean streak that burned low like a coal fire. He'd been riding Linehorn for 5 years and fancied himself second to the boss, which wasn't true. He ran his mouth too much, and his riding was sloppy, but he told good stories and made the younger hands feel brave. He liked to needle Hob. Quiet ones always drew the worst sort of attention from men like Lars. So when the winter thinned and spring blew in raw across the flats, Lars brought her. "Got you a bride, Hob," he said loud enough for all to hear. "Figure you want someone broke same as you." The girl, or woman rather, because she wasn't child young, though still years from worn, stood behind him with dust on her skirt and a twisted left leg that made her stand half-turned, like she was always trying to walk away and never could. She had long, colorless hair pulled into a braid that looked chewed at the end, and her eyes were 2 shades darker than stormwater. "She got a limp," Lars added with a grin, "but she don't bite." The hands laughed. Not all of them, but enough to make it cruel. Hob stared at her. She didn't lower her gaze. That surprised him. "What's her name?" he asked, quiet but clear. Lars looked confused. "Hell if I know." Picked her up from old Dan's lot outside Bramblegate. Said she'd been walking north a piece. Sold her for 2 bags of feed and a busted rifle. The woman spoke then. "No one sold me. I bartered for passage." "You're a fool." Lars struck her, not hard, not like a man striking to kill, but sharp and backhanded, enough to silence and humiliate. She staggered but didn't cry out, just looked at him like a clock winding backward. Hob stepped forward, not fast, not furious, just moving. That alone made the yard quiet. "No more," he said. "She's not yours, nor mine unless she chooses it." Lars shrugged, made a joke, walked off. Hob looked at the girl again. "You need a place?" he asked. She nodded. "You work." She looked down at her leg. "Work better than you think," she said, "and I don't drink or steal." That was good enough. He let her stay in the hayloft the first week, let her come and go. Let the others talk. She limped, but she worked, first sweeping tack rooms, then cleaning stirrups, brushing the half-wild horses no one else dared approach. The animals took to her slowly, like they had with him. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words had weight. Her name, she told him later, was Marla, just Marla, no last name, no place claimed. He didn't press. By summer, the crew stopped laughing. The woman they called the joke bride was mending leather, setting snares for coyote, and talking to Hob like he wasn't a ghost. When the rains came late and the boss needed riders to run fence along the north cut, Hob took her. Not behind him, not riding pillion, but on her own horse, one of the half-broke bays that bit at anyone else. "She can't ride," Lars scoffed. "She'll ride better than you," Hob answered. She did. Bruised herself bloody the first 3 days and didn't say a word. On the 4th, she stayed upright. On the 5th, she rode like she was born to it. Out on the plains, with wind hissing low through the grass and fence lines stretching black to the horizon, they shared coffee, silence, and stories in pieces. Marla never said who crippled her. Hob never asked. She never asked why he didn't smile. He never said. They understood each other without needing to explain the wreckage that shaped them. Then came the raid. 7 riders, faces wrapped in red kerchiefs, rifles like wolves, teeth, storming the Linehorn pasture on a moonless night. They shot 2 men, torched the south barn, and scattered 60 head of cattle. Hob woke to the fire and smoke, pistol in hand, before the shouts even reached the bunkhouse. Marla was already up, barefoot, eyes full of purpose. She limped fast, almost running, grabbing a lasso and Hob's spare rifle. He didn't stop her. The two of them rode into the night, chasing the shapes. By dawn, they'd tracked and downed 2 of the rustlers, not killed, roped, tied, and bleeding from the mouth where Marla had cracked one with a stirrup iron. The men laughed when they saw her limp. She broke the teeth of one, slow and cold. Hob watched. After that, no one called her the joke, not out loud. By midsummer, she had her own horse. Not a cast-off or a training mount, but a real blooded dun gelding, one of the young ones from the winter foal crop that taken to her hand like a bee to sugar. Hob didn't say much when he handed her the reins, just nodded once and walked off, but the gesture rippled quiet through the camp. She named the gelding Bristle, rode him bareback the first week until he learned her balance, learned the tilt of her weight and the way her left leg favored. It made her ride strange, knee-high, spine straight, body tilted like a falling star, but no one watching would have called her weak. Linehorn was changing. The raid left its mark, 2 good men buried, 4 others laid up, and the boss hiring green boys just to fill the gaps. That made the hands edgy, the work rougher, the nights longer. Marla kept working. Never complained. She stayed out with the herds, slept in the saddle with a rifle across her chest, learned to read the hills like Hob did. She started mending gear for others, too, not for coin, but for peace. There was a quiet power in usefulness. It turned the tide faster than fear. Lars simmered. He stopped speaking to her after the raid, like pretending she wasn't there would erase what happened. But men like him don't forget slights. They let them rot inside. He drank more, ranted louder, kept the younger boys circling him like buzzards around a corpse that hadn't realized it was dead yet. One night, after a long ride out past Devil's Spine, Marla found her bunk covered in piss. Her coat gone, her boots sliced. She didn't say anything, just lit a match, pulled her knife, and sat on the bunk all night with Bristle tethered outside. In the morning, Hob saw her bare feet in the frost. He said nothing, but that evening he handed her a new pair of boots, stitched heavy and fine. Marla didn't thank him, but she didn't need to. That week she beat one of Lars's pups half senseless behind the barn. The boy had mouthed off, called her crippled and lucky. She slammed his head against the water trough and left his tooth in the mud. After that, no more boots went missing. Still, things weren't stable. Linehorn's boss, an old man with lungs full of dust and eyes sharp as hawk glass, started taking Marla with him on supply runs. Said she kept her mouth shut and her eyes open. Hob came, too, when he was asked. The 3 of them made long rides down to Combs and Hollow Creek, trading for grain, new tack, even medicine when it could be spared. One trip in late autumn, they rode into Pine Barrel and found the town burned out. Smoldering black where the feed store had been, blood streaked through the dirt down by the stables. Bodies, too. 7 townsfolk, hands tied behind backs, eyes left open to the sky. Bandits again, not the same ones as before, these were different, organized, marked with strange white paint on their hands and necks. No one in town had seen them coming, no one left to say where they'd gone. Marla walked the streets like a ghost, silent and careful, pausing by a well where a girl her height lay crumpled, one leg broken at the knee and bent in the wrong direction. She knelt down and pressed a hand to the girl's neck, but there was no blood pumping beneath. Hob stood beside her, said nothing. When they returned to Linehorn, the boss gathered every rider and told them plainly war was coming. The rangelands were cracking, law wasn't worth the paper it was written on, and men were turning into wolves. Hob knew it already, so did Marla. The others learned quick. They started training more, less herding, more shooting. They rode in pairs, sometimes threes, night watches doubled, fires burned lower. Marla drilled daily, took to rifle like it was born in her bones, favoring one with a short stock to brace better against her shoulder. Her aim was slow but steady, she didn't miss. Hobbs started riding with her more often again, tracking prints, studying signs, working signals. She learned his silences, and he learned her eyes. Winter dropped hard. Snow iced over the hills, and even the coyotes went quiet. The crew huddled in tight, half wild from cold and cabin nerves. Then Lars went missing. Gone before dawn, horse and rifle both taken, but nothing else disturbed. The boss said leave it. Man like that, he said, disappears on his own terms, but Marla didn't believe it. Hob either. 2 days later they found his horse outside Thorn Hollow, riderless, muzzle soaked in blood. Hob checked the saddle, found a white handprint painted on the cantle. It wasn't random. It wasn't wandering. It was a message. The White Hand men had moved in close, taken one of their own, and left their mark like a promise. When they rode back to Linehorn, Marla didn't speak, not for hours. Then, in the dark of the barn, she whispered, "This ain't like the others. This ain't petty theft. This is something bigger." Hob nodded. She unwrapped a strip of cloth from her wrist, black wool, stitched with red thread, and handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "Debt," she said, "owed to me, by men who walk painted white." He didn't ask more. That night the snow came heavier, and in the silence of the drift, the wind carried with it something like a scream. Not human, not animal, something in between. The riders of Linehorn lit no fires that night. By spring, blood had been spilled on Linehorn land again. It started with cattle, found gutted in the creek, hide peeled back clean as paper, tongues cut out. No tracks, no bullet holes, just the paint, always the paint. White handprints on bark on fence posts, smeared on the rocks like some godless blessing. Then came the dogs. Half the kennels emptied in a night, no barking, no fight, just doors swung open and pawprints leading nowhere. The boss sent riders to every edge, north past the red shale, east into the coulee. Few returned with news, most returned shaken. One didn't return at all. It was Marla who finally caught sign. Deep in the rocklands, where the cliffs twisted like broken bone, she and Hob tracked a shimmer of ash in the wind. Smoke, light and cunning, curling behind stone, they dismounted and walked, quiet, careful, rifles drawn. There in a cut between bluffs they found them, not a full camp, just a trace of it. Fire pit cold but recent. A ragged piece of red cloth torn into a tree fork. Symbols carved into stone, circles intersecting like chains, spidery writing neither of them could read. Marla touched it, felt it. A look passed over her like someone stepping on her grave. "We're too late," she murmured, but they were here. Close, watching. Hob nodded. He didn't need proof to believe her. Back at Linehorn, the riders were restless. Guns got cleaned too often. Meals went half-eaten. Every knock at the gate brought eyes to rifles. The younger boys drank more. One of them, Elty, a red-haired kid barely 16, tried to run south and never made it past the ridge. Arrow in the spine, straight down. White paint streaked down his cheeks like war tears. The message was clear, no one left, not alive. The boss ordered trenches dug. Old war tricks, barricades, hidden lines, trip ropes strung through brush. He called in allies, too, folk from adjacent spreads, hard-nosed men who remembered the Kansas border fights, women who carried pistols under their aprons and had eyes that had seen worse. Marla led drills now, not because she asked to, because she was better, smarter. She moved with the limp like it wasn't even there anymore. Her eyes cut through lies, her voice got sharper, louder. Commands snapped from her tongue like whip cracks. Hob stood back and watched. When she spoke, the others listened. Not because she raised her voice, because she didn't need to. Hob saw it plain, they weren't just surviving anymore. They were becoming something else. Then one night, a rider came from Hollow Creek, face torn, breath rattling. He dropped in the dirt like a sack of feed and bled out before he could say more than 2 words. They're coming. 3 days later, the first siege hit. It came at dusk when the sky was red and the cattle lowed nervous in their pens. No horns, no warning, just shapes, dozens of them, moving through the trees, rifles flashing, arrows whistling. The white-hand men, they weren't bandits. They were soldiers, Linehorn's walls held, barely. The old trenches slowed them, but not enough. The barns burned. One lookout tower collapsed. 2 riders died in the first 5 minutes, one by arrow, one from fire. Marla moved through the smoke like a storm, rifle in hand, commands flying. She climbed the silo ladder, found a perch, and laid down fire with such precision that Hob, watching from below, swore he saw fear in the enemy's movements. Not retreat, just confusion. As if they couldn't believe someone like her was hurting them this badly. But it wasn't enough, not yet. They pulled back before dawn, silent again, no shouting, no threats. Just vanished into the tree line like smoke through a screen, left Linehorn smoldering, dozens wounded, a third of the cattle gone. Hob and Marla stood over the field as sun broke the frost. Neither said anything, neither needed to. She was already making plans in her head. He could see it in her eyes, the way she held the map tight in her fist. She was done waiting. Later, while mending a wound on her thigh from shrapnel, she finally told him. "They marked me once," she said, "years back before Bramblegate." Hob sat still. "I was 13. Father sold me to a trader. He ran with men like these, said the limp meant I'd be cheap. They took me south, camped out near a dry canyon. I got away, cut a man's throat with a mule shoe. Been walking north ever since." Hob didn't speak. They wear the white to say they're pure, say they're burning out weakness, but it's just cruelty, ritualized. Fed by fire and blood. She met his gaze. "They didn't expect me to live. I did. Now they'll regret it." He looked at her then, not like a rider, not like a survivor, but like something else. Like what she was becoming, the pride. That's what they started calling her, in hushed tones behind fires, in letters sent to neighboring camps. The pride of the riders, not because she was beautiful, not because she was brave, but because she made them stand taller, gave them reason. Gave them something to believe in. Even the boss started deferring to her. That night, as rain began to fall and the wounded groaned in the bunkhouse, Hob watched her speak with the mapmen and the scouts. He watched the fire catch in her braid, her limp all but vanished in the dark. He thought about the first time he saw her, dust in her hair, one leg turned wrong, slapped down in front of him like a joke. And now the joke had teeth. And it was hungry. The next time they came, they didn't come on horses, they came on foot, silent, closer, smarter. Wearing skins turned inside out, faces darkened with ash, carrying blades instead of guns. It was raining hard, thunder in the hills, and most of Linehorn's riders were in the bunkhouse tending wounds or soaking blankets. Marla didn't sleep, hadn't for days. She heard them before she saw them, mud squelching wrong in the south ravine, too many feet for any deer herd, too quiet for cattle. She moved fast, rifle slung, knife in hand. Hob caught her just before the gate. "You sure?" "They're in," she said. "I can feel it." They circled wide through the trees, boots muffled in pine needles. Past the broken fence line and the old windmill where the ground sloped down into shadow. That's where they found the bodies. 2 men hung by their ankles, throats slit to ribbons. One had been the stable boy, not even 20. The other was old Tamson, deaf and half-blind, hadn't held a gun in years. Marla crouched. They're feeding fear. "Making example." Hob nodded, no use wasting time. They tracked the white-hand men through the orchard, cut between 2 silos, and saw them. 6 figures in soaked cloaks, slipping toward the side barn. One carried a jar of pitch. Another a coil of fuses. Fire setters. Hob shot first, clean headshot, dropped the man with the pitch before he could turn. Marla hit the next, through the gut, screamed once before falling, the rest scattered, but Linehorn was awake now. Riders came flooding out of the bunkhouse, half-dressed, fully armed. The barn was saved. But not before the last one, the smallest of the fire-setters, lit the fuse and hurled it into the hay cart. Flame bloomed like a mouth screaming. Marla leapt in after it, no hesitation. Pulled the fuse free, kicked the cart over, scattered wet straw until the spark choked out. Her hands burned raw. She didn't care. In the morning, they counted 6 white-hand bodies, none alive. No brand, no mark of rank, just scars. They all bore them, patterns cut into skin, deliberate and clean, ritual scarring, some on their arms, one with it carved into the inside of her thigh. Marla looked too long at that one. Hob saw it, she was remembering. "We need to take it to them," she said. "No choice now," the boss agreed. They planned the raid over 4 days. Scouts moved north, toward the shale gulch and the dry canyon where Marla once escaped. It wasn't guesswork, it was memory. She drew the map herself by hand from burned recollection and gut feel. They'd set up in the old gold tunnels, long collapsed and forgotten by the law. That's where they trained their initiates. That's where they dragged the taken. That's where the leadership slept, breathing in the rot of what they'd made. Hob was the first to volunteer, Marla second. They took only 9, the best, the quietest. Men and women who'd stopped flinching when fire snapped or arrows sang. Among them, a woman named Jessica, who once rode for the U.S. Cavalry before they hung her for killing her commander. A boy named Lowe, barely 17, but dead-eyed and patient. And Marla, who no one called broken anymore. They rode under moonless dark, no torches. No horses past the ridgeline, just boots and breath and knives. Each step was weighted. Hob moved beside Marla without speaking. They shared silence like a prayer. At the mouth of the canyon they split. Jessica and Lowe circled to block escape. Hob took the rear. Marla led the front. It was darker than black inside, air thick with cold dust and the stink of old blood. They crept like ghosts, heard chants, dull drums, saw the flicker of ritual fires ahead. Then she saw him, not the same man who'd once bought her. But close, same teeth, same voice, same smile like something rotting under snow. He stood on a makeshift altar, shirtless, arms painted bone white. He was preaching, not with words but with sound, rhythmic, low. It echoed down the stone and into the marrow. Marla didn't wait. She walked forward, alone, no signal, no plan. She walked into the ring of torchlight, limping like she had that first day in front of Linehorn's riders. Limping like memory, limping on purpose. The chanting stopped. The man stared. She didn't speak, just lifted her rifle. He raised his hand to stop her, some kind of command, like she was still property. She shot him through the chest. Then it began. Chaos exploded. Gunfire, screams, smoke. Jessica's war cry ripping down the tunnels, Lowe's knife in a man's gut. Hobbs' shotgun shattering ribs. Marla didn't blink. She fired again. Then she was out of bullets, so she used the rifle stock. One to the jaw, another to the throat. Then she grabbed a blade, fought like a demon. They didn't win clean. 2 of their 9 fell. Jessica took a round to the belly. The boy Lowe disappeared in the smoke, found later, fingers crushed, breathing shallow. But when the fire finally died, the White Hand camp was ash, and Marla stood atop the altar, not trembling, not weeping, just breathing, calm, whole. Hob looked up at her through the smoke and ruin. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The pride had taken vengeance. But the war wasn't over yet. In the days that followed, they buried their dead in the canyon. No one brought the bodies back to Linehorn. There was no point. The ground there was sacred in a ruined way, filled with old pain and new blood. Jessica's body burned on the ridge under Marla's orders. Lowe lived, barely. Hob carried him on his back through the shale gulch, and the boy didn't speak for 3 days. When he did, he only asked where Marla had gone. She had stayed behind, not long, just long enough to mark the altar in her own way. She used her blood and white ash from the bandits' own fire, drew a different kind of symbol, not theirs, hers, a bent figure, upright now, rising from flame. She painted it on the cave wall and left without a word. By the time she returned, the hills had gone green again. Linehorn looked different, scarred, but standing. Marla changed, too, not in the limp it still showed when she was tired, but in her silence. It had deepened, gone dense. The kind of silence you enter, not pass through. She spoke when needed, that was enough. When riders came to Linehorn for aid or alliance, they asked for her. The boss didn't mind. He was old and proud and tired. He sat more often than stood now. Hob noticed the changes others missed, the way she flinched at children's voices, the way she never turned her back on mirrors. She still woke gasping sometimes. Wouldn't let anyone touch her then, not even him. But she always came back, always. They built a watchtower together, not for orders, not even for defense, just a high place above the stables where she could see the horizon every morning. She liked that, said it made her feel early again. Rumors spread. Not just about the white hand's slaughter in the canyon, but about the woman who led it, the limping rider, the one they'd tried to break. Stories always twisted in the telling, but the bones were true. Other spreads sent for her, asked her to train their people, show them how to survive, how to fight the kind of war the law had abandoned. She refused most. Took only the worst cases, broken ranches, half-dead survivors, widow-led outfits barely holding land with 6 good horses and a prayer, and she made them ready. She taught not just how to shoot, but how to watch. How to ride by scent, how to bury tools where men wouldn't think to look, how to find strength in the wound. Some tried to name her outlaw, she let them. Others called her commander, she ignored them. But when riders from Coldthorn came north with a wagon of chained girls, limping, bleeding, sold cheap like livestock, Marla met them alone, unarmed. She stood in the middle of the trail and spoke only one word: leave. They laughed. Then they reached for guns. None of them walked away. After that, no more slavers rode north through her country, not if they'd heard the stories. One winter, a U.S. Marshal came riding to Linehorn with papers in his vest and orders to retrieve the woman known as the Pride. He came with 2 deputies, cold eyes, clean boots. Said she was wanted in 5 territories, said she was harboring fugitives and arming radicals. Marla heard him out, let him finish. Then she walked into the bunkhouse, fetched a ledger. Inside, names, hundreds of them, ranches saved. Attacks prevented, children returned, bandits killed, proof enough to bury his orders. She gave it to him, looked him in the eyes. He left without another word. His boots were muddy by then. That spring, Hob found her outside the gate, watching the wind comb through the grass. "You thinking of going?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. "Where then?" "Where I'm needed." He paused. "You're needed here." She looked at him, really looked. For the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled. Not wide, not soft, but real, sharp at the edges, meant to last. "I know," she said. "That's why I stayed." There was no kiss, no embrace. That wasn't how they worked. But they sat there a long time, watching the land turn gold. And the other riders watched them from a distance, not with mockery, not even curiosity, just respect, because they knew the story. How a girl no one wanted had been dragged across the dirt and handed over like bad luck. How a quiet man took her in, and how she became the reason they were still alive. The limp never left her, neither did the scars. But by then no one called her broken, they called her the Pride. Years passed, not fast, not kind, but steady like water shaping stone. Linehorn grew quiet again, though it never forgot what had come before. The bunkhouse was rebuilt, stronger. The south pasture doubled in size. Children were born on the land, some to riders, some taken in after dust and blood had orphaned them. Marla taught them to shoot, same as she taught the rest. Taught them to read the ground, listen to wind, look a man in the eye even when scared. She never left Linehorn. Sometimes she rode out for weeks, visiting broken ranches, old allies, places where white hands still haunted memory, but she always returned. Always to the same narrow room above the stables. To Bristle, old and scarred now but still loyal. To Hob, who never called her anything she didn't earn, he aged faster than she did. The kind of man whose strength burned like dry timber, fast, bright, finite, his hair grayed, his hands shook in the cold, but he still rode. Still watched her the same way he did the first time, silent, certain, reverent in a way no preacher ever managed. When the second great drought came, Linehorn nearly folded, springs vanished, grass burned under the sun, coyotes grew bolder, leaner. Raiders began circling again, new flags, same hunger, but Marla didn't yield. She led the riders south to the river that hadn't flowed in 15 years, dug down through the dust and found water. Clean, deep, cold. The riders called it Pride Spring. Marked it with a stone carved by hand, rough and beautiful. They drank from it without shame. It was around then that the sickness started, Hob first, a cough that didn't leave, a fever he hid too long. The doctor from Chalk Ridge said it was the kind that withers a man from the inside, no cure. Only slowing, Marla sat beside him in the loft when the coughing was worst, wiped his mouth when the blood came up, never looked away. He didn't talk much, even then. One night, as he lay under a blanket patched with old saddle cloth, he reached out and took her hand. "You were the only thing they gave me that ever mattered," he said. Marla didn't cry. She just nodded and sat with him until the sun rose. He died in silence, face turned toward the corral. The horses were running that morning, kicking up frost. She watched them a long while before she moved. The funeral was simple. Riders from 5 counties came to watch. No preacher, just words from Marla, short and final. "He saw through things," she said. "That was his strength. He saw me and made space." They buried him under the lone tree past the east fence. She carved the marker herself. After that, she changed again, not colder, not harder, just leaner. Like grief had honed her to the grain, she still rode, still trained the greenhorns. But the fire that had once burned outward now burned low and deep. The white hand movement never rose again, broken in the canyon, scattered. Some tried to regroup years later under new symbols. They disappeared before they reached the plains. No one asked what happened. No one needed to. Marla never called herself a leader, never sat in the boss's chair. She stayed in her room above the stable, ate simple, kept the rifle by her bed, walked with the limp that never left. But when someone was hurt, they came to her. When something stalked the herd, they asked her what to do. When the nights grew too still, they looked to the watchtower. She didn't give speeches. She didn't pray. She just kept the fire lit, the walls strong, and the silence steady. And so the legend grew. Riders spoke of her across 3 territories. The limping woman who had broken a war cult, the girl who rose from a cage and carved a world that could not ignore her. The one who had been given as a joke and became the last word in every serious mouth. Marla rode less as the years wore on, her hair silvered, her hands stiffened, but she never retired, never left the land. One night when the stars hung low and heavy, she climbed the watchtower alone, sat with her rifle across her knees and stared east. Some say she saw him. Hob, standing just beyond the fence line, coat stirring in the breeze, hat pulled low. Waiting, others say she just sat still for a long time, until the wind quieted and her breath slowed, and she went like he had, facing the land she'd bled for. They found her the next morning, eyes closed, body upright, rifle clean. No sign of pain, just peace. They buried her beside him, no preacher, no songs, just riders standing still, hats in hand. On the marker, Marla, the pride, nothing broken. And from then on, when young riders asked who she was, they were told this. She was given away to shame a man. She became the reason they stood at all, and the land remembers her footsteps, even the limp. especially the limp. Because that's where the power started and never stopped.